here, and thank you, Talk Niger, for asking me to facilitate this evening. I hope you guys have had a good day so far. As the topic says, we're talking and discussing Black men and mental health. And we want to get you guys feel about, in your perspective, about what that is, what you think it is, and what you're willing to learn about mental health, especially for our community, specifically men. But we do see some ladies here, so we all welcome you as well, so you can engage in the conversation as we proceed. Just for introduction purposes, we have panelists here. We have Uzoma as we have Mr. Uzoma, we have Matthew, and then we have Chika, who will be discussing, who kind of like, from their personal experiences, kind of explain some of the questions we might have for tonight. So with no further ado, does anyone have any questions to start us off?
No.
Who said no? Because the person said no probably does have a question or two. Okay, so this pretty much is going to be engaging. So you're not just going to hear us speak. We would love to hear you guys speak as well. So let's start off with one question. I think these terms are often intertwined, or often used, but I think tonight we really want to define the difference between what mental health is and what mental illness is. So I'm going to ask you guys, what do you guys believe or think are the differences between the two?
I can start. So for me, mental health is your emotional and psychological well-being. And mental illness is more so like a genetic disorder. Like there's a chemistry issue that you have within your brain that leads to physical manifestations. And it can affect your ability to interact with others, your ability to develop relationships. It can lead to self-harm. So for me, I guess like mental health is more so like a little bit more abstract, while mental illness is something that's like that's physical at its root.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Uzoma, were you trying to say something?
Yeah. I was about to say I agree with that, but to add to it, I also feel like mental illness is kind of like conditions that affect like how you behave, how you think, how you feel, how you like perceive things. And similar to what Paul had, Chika, similar to what Chika has said, I also feel like it's like your well-being, like your state. I think it's something that we all have. I think outside of mental illness, there's things that can push us on a continuum either further up our mental health. I think there are things that we're born into that impacts our mental health. I think there's life events that impact it, whether it be like a death, a job, a breakup. I think it's something that we all have, but I think mental illness is more so something specific and like how someone's behaving or a disorder that they may have.
Okay. Any other person would like to have an input on what the difference might be between mental health and mental illness?
Yeah, I'm going to call on Dr. Ifeanyi, if you want to add a...
Dr. Ifeanyi, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so in my profession, I do see a lot of people with mental health and mental illness. And I was listening to everybody's statements, and everybody's been spot on. Mental health is more like when you're looking at your well-being, the whole package with dealing with how you enter your mental health is in your like physically, your finances, your job, your environment, how all of these different things interact and make you feel like you're overall well with the way you're feeling mentally. But then mental illness is a little bit more severe, because this can impair your functioning at socially and also personally and also occupationally. So a lot of people could struggle with illnesses such as depression, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder. They could also struggle with PTSD. There's a list of different psychiatric or mental illnesses that could be impairing for a person that would lead them to possibly start getting on medications, seeking therapy services. So yeah, everybody's been spot on so far with their statements about mental health and mental illness.
Thank you, Dr. Ifeanyi. I totally agree with you guys. I believe when we talk about mental illness, we're talking more so the diagnosis or the conditions or the symptoms that an individual is exhibiting that leads to a diagnosis, be it bipolar, depression, or what have you. Where mental health, just as your physical health, as you take care of it, you eat healthy, you engage in exercise. So more so you're working towards benefiting or doing things to improve your mental health as well. So yeah, great input. So before I throw out any more questions, does anyone have any questions to ask right now? This is the platform to engage and, break some of those stigmas or break some of those things that you think you know, but you would like more insight about. Anyone else? I hear crickets. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. So has there been conversations around your household regarding mental health when you're growing up or even right now, presently? Are you seeing conversations around mental health being discussed right now, or were they discussed in the past, or they're still not talked about even up to today? So think about your current household and where you live. You stay with your family or not? Are conversations around mental health being addressed?
No. I growing up, it wasn't discussed. It was just more or less like I've said to many people before. If somebody had a mental issue, they were considered just be sick. They wouldn't say, they couldn't diagnose it. They didn't even have a method of actually trying to diagnose it. So even if you had some type of mental illness or, a diagnosis that wasn't really diagnosed, in the end, that person is just sick, or the person's a mad person on the street, So, and even up to today, it's almost an unwilling situation that it's unwilling that they're unwilling to learn about mental health. It's going to be always that person is just sick, and it's unfortunate. Every time I try to bring it up or I try to talk, well, this person has this mental condition. Oh, it's just that person is just crazy. That's all. But not saying that this person maybe needs some help, or this person, and even if it's not diagnosed, maybe it is something that's messing with your mental state. Like, let's say, you're having financial problems and you're unhappy at work and you really feel like you're losing it all. They still don't want to talk about it. Just, oh, you're just being soft, or are you not supposed to be stronger than that? They take it as a sign of weakness instead of as a cry for help.
Oh, Chinle, you're touching a lot of pointers here as you address that question. Talked about masculinity. You talked about more so not having discussions are not as raw as it gets when it's brought up, or people are just shoving it off the way, saying it's just that person's sick or that person's just crazy. And so I wanted to piggyback from that conversation. Was this more of an environmental setting, or was this based here? Was this when you had these questions posed? Was this based here or somewhere else? Like based here in the States? That's what I mean.
Both in the States and in Nigeria.
Okay, cool.
Only in Nigeria, it's I guess it was a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a lot worse. But here, it was like still, it's like a taboo to even discuss.
Thank you. Any of our panelists, do you guys want to chime in terms of, is this conversations being held, or you guys are the pioneers in having these discussions right in your households?
So growing up, we didn't really discuss mental health. I really didn't become aware of it until I got to college. When I majored in psychology, and I saw the importance of addressing your mental health, right? But then I would say the first time that I really brought it up with my parents. So I'm Nigerian. I was born there, but I grew up here. And my parents grew up in Nigeria. When I brought it up in regards to a sibling who was going through a certain issue, and I thought that it would be smart for her to start seeing a therapist, they sort of brushed it off as if like it's not necessary, it's not important, it's not going to make a difference. And I think it's tied to just their culture that like they look at the desire to seek therapy or the need to do therapy as like a sign of weakness, as a sign of someone being crazy, right? And so in my experience in America, I haven't, like, there is certainly a taboo when it comes to mental health. And I would say over the last few years, that taboo has decreased to the point that even within my close circle of friends, every one of us sees a therapist. Even with my girlfriend, I was the one that convinced her that I think she needs to go see her therapist. She needs to go see a therapist to address a traumatic event that happened early in her life, right? So like within like, I guess the millennial and younger generation, that taboo has lessened, but I'm sure it still exists.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. You know, it's still considered a taboo, or it's still I guess not looked upon, even as it's being broadcasted every day through social media, through the news outlets, through experts. But you know, I think culture for most of us who are Nigerians and Africans, culture plays a huge factor in terms of acceptance of mental health in our homes. Anybody else would like to share experience about if mental health is being discussed, or maybe you started having the conversations about mental health in your household?
Yeah, I want to like hear what Harold has to say, because he has you kind of want to hear like someone who was kind of brought up here who doesn't have the Nigerian background.
Sure.
Harold, I know you hear me, bro. Maybe it's on mute. But while we wait for him, I just kind of want to add, it's growing up, that conversation, as most of us has mentioned, was like did not exist. And if it did exist, it was more so from the frame of this person is crazy. Therefore, then you were given certain rules like, okay, if you're thinking about dating, don't date in that family because there's likelihood that you don't want to have kids who are crazy. So those terms were like what I heard growing up. Any type of mental health challenge, you were deemed as crazy. So even when we got to the States, and I went to a predominantly Black school, HBCU, the first one in the country, if you want to Google us, the conversation was still consistent. Like men were not talking about mental health, right? And it was kind of like, nah, bro, you good, man. Just like shake it off. And it wasn't a conversation that we had. And to the point of, one of my fraternity brothers, he died by suicide at the age of 23, right? So I think in 2013, that's when we all kind of woke up like, yo, like we need to, start paying more attention to that. But even that situation in itself was still kind of, there was some pushback. And, when we try to do some activities around like, suicide prevention or mental health awareness, one, the family did not want that news to be public, that's how he passed. So that kind of, hampered our efforts in terms of promoting that message. But overall, it's kind of like, yeah, it happened, kind of brush it off, but it wasn't something that was quote unquote manly enough to go into in terms of having that discussion.
Thank you once again for saying those experiences, especially with one of your frat brothers. As we all here, we hope that to educate. We hope to give you the charge to go forward and embrace and talk about mental health to whoever, be it your immediate family member or your closest friend. So that's the aim, to get conversations going, to the ladies, if you have male friends, to have that conversation with your male friends, and just vice versa, women, your conversation with your female friends or your male group, have those conversations. It might be hard, it might be difficult, just like Uchenna, trying to get through his parents and family, but as often as we could, to make efforts towards having those candid discussions. So in as much as people might think mental health is mad or sick, we also have a stigma in terms of going through a therapist or seeing a therapist. And, we want to talk about what are those stigmas that one might have in seeing a therapist, or what are your assumptions that you might have against seeing a therapist? And the floor is open.
Yeah, I mean, as a provider, what I do hear from, as a psychiatrist, what I do hear from patients in regards to the stigma of why they don't want to go in therapy, because therapy, when you're entering therapy, you're going to be talking about things that you may have put in the back of your brain or whatnot, where you don't want to just get in and divulge, because you're going to have to be very real with yourself. And the thing is, a lot of us have deep-seated implanted roots that are very painful or traumatic, or things that we don't want to get vulnerable about. So it takes a lot for somebody to open up to first open up and share or answer questions, or do really a lot of self-reflection based off the questions a therapist will ask. So I'm on the end where people would want medication to help solve their problems, but I tell them the medication is not going to help you actively pay your bills or do this, how you're getting it. It may help reduce symptoms, when not make it easier for you, but you also have to take that next step and work on yourself. And that's what therapy does.
Yeah. I think for me, this is probably like the first time in my career. I've been a therapist for the last 5-6 years. And this is the first time I've only seen Black men. And so a lot of things that pop up when it comes to the stigma, a lot of them think they can't afford therapy, which has some truth to it, but isn't completely true. They think that it's not for men. They think that it's for white people. They think that, which comes up a lot, they think that therapy kind of replaces God. And so people have like this idea that like, oh, like you don't need therapy, just like pray it away, go to church. A lot of people don't think it works. Like I feel like just as much as people are more exposed to it through social media and movies, I also feel like some of these movies give misinformation, and it kind of like sensationalizes it. And so a lot of people think they could just look at memes and inspiration and quotes all day, that they'll be good. So there's a lot of things that pop up for me on the day to day.
An assumption that relates to me, well, it's not an assumption that I had, but it's something that was expressed to me, like when I would tell people that I'm seeing a therapist. People would think that like therapy is not necessary unless you have an obvious condition or disorder. Like if you have bipolar, or if you're going through a bout of depression, then it makes sense to see a therapist. But for me, I look at therapy as an opportunity to maintain good, positive mental health, because that's going to affect other areas in my life in a really positive way, right? If I'm mentally in a good space, I'm going to perform better at work. I'm going to have more healthier relationships. I'm going to have more confidence in myself, right? And so I think for me, like I haven't had like an obvious condition or disorder, but for me, like therapy has been a good way of like reflecting on times in my life and things that I could do better, but then also ways that I am overly critical of myself. Like for example, there are negative characteristics for like jealousy, envy, that it's a natural human emotion, right? It's impossible not to feel those things, right? And when I would feel those things, I would feel, oh, there's something wrong with me, right? I have an issue, I have a problem, right? But then when I go talk to my therapist about it, it's like, yo, that's natural, that's okay. It's not about feeling it, it's about how do you let those feelings affect your relationships, your interactions with others. As long as you keep it at bay and continue to maintain positive, healthy interactions, and those feelings are totally fine because they're natural. Like you're gonna feel it. It's impossible not to feel joy and happiness for other success all the time. Like that's just not realistic.
Thank you.
I just want to add that I suggest therapy whenever I get, and I used to tell people it's best to be proactive with therapy as opposed to being reactive. So if you're proactive, then when you do fall, quote unquote fall, you have the tools in your toolbox to kind of address that issue head on. But if we're more reactive, I mean, you can still experience the benefit, but it may take much longer. So a lot of the pushback that I get when I suggest therapy, usually with my Nigerian friends, is like they then feel like their faith is being challenged, right? I'm not. Well, that means I'm not praying hard enough, right? I don't have enough faith, right? Or I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. But then I always tell them, like, you know, which is why we have this shirt here. Prayer and therapy, you can do both, right? It doesn't say because you're seeing a therapist, therefore you have to abandon praying, right? You can combine whatever resources work for you as part of your treatment plan. So, so my Christian friends, I try to send them to like therapists who are more like Christian leaning. That seems to put them at ease. But generally, initially, the pushback is like it's an attack on their faith that they're not praying hard enough, or they don't believe hard enough.
Thank you. Someone wanted to add?
Sorry, this is Uzama. I apologize being a bit late here, dealing with my kids. I wanted to add to that, right? I haven't quite seen a therapist personally, but I think if I may add a perspective, you know, I agree with everything that's been added here about seeing a therapist, especially the religion bit, and folks kind of misunderstanding what it really means to go explore therapy. I think, you know, in my journey in the last year or two, what we are sort of missing or misunderstanding about this whole term therapy or life in general is it's really about internal, right? Even if we talk about religion is really what you believe in. We can preach all we want. If we as an individual do not believe in what we're preaching, it doesn't matter, right? So therapy just gives you an avenue to help you investigate yourself. If you're able to do that on your own, you may not need therapy, in a medical formal setting, right? But therapy gives you the equipment, the ability to take a step back and give, and kind of look into yourself. And I think we struggle with doing that on our own, which is why we have therapists who are supposed to help us do that. So folks got to just understand that it's no longer necessarily about religion. It's no longer necessarily about, whether I feel confident in doing this or confident in doing that. It's just about you as a person, understanding you as a person, right? So I think I'm trying to think of it from a standpoint how to just completely separate it from all these other things that people try to tie into it, and just look at it as you as an individual, looking into yourself. Because to me, that's really what, life and therapy is about. It's just investigating yourself continually as you move through your day to day.
Okay, thank you. Any other perspective in terms of maybe you haven't seen a therapist because you've had some assumptions about it in regards to therapy? We've heard about a couple of our speakers have talked about their experiences as a provider or undergoing therapy, but do we have anyone that's hesitant about going to therapy, or they feel there's no need to go to therapy right now? And if you'd like to share, that'd be great.
I think some people sometimes people misconstrue therapy as well. It's all about seeing a doctor or a professional. No, there's peer. You can talk to your peers. You can talk to someone who's just a regular, like when you were in high school, you had a guidance counselor. That person's not a professional, say, doctor who does therapy. A therapist is not exclusive to just going to see somebody that does this professionally. Sometimes it is. A therapist could be, as Gino said, it could be like going to see a pastor. That could be your therapy. Talking to a priest, talking to a pastor, talking to someone who, I mean, it's always preferable to go to someone who's trained in it, obviously. But I think sometimes we need to, and that's one of the fears that they're saying that I need to go see a doctor. You're saying that I'm a mental case or something like that, you know? So that's what I personally feel. I think that we need to say and say, yes, there's more than one avenue of therapy.
We have a comment in the chat box from Harold. He said, I think people try to avoid doing the work, so they're resistant to therapy. So I wonder if any of the panelists had any reaction to that.
Hello, this is Dr. Okwesili. I know this is supposed to be men's mental health, but I wanted to—
You're welcome. You're welcome.
A little bit. And just on the, I think it was the last comment that you read, try to avoid doing the work. So background wise, just to give you guys some information, I am double boarded. I am an adult psychiatrist and a child psychiatrist. And based off of kind of the last, I guess the last statement, which is that some people are resistant to do therapy. The way I describe it to a lot of my patients is that when we're trying to deal with mental health in general, and you're giving somebody, let's say they do have an active diagnosis of depression or anxiety, I always tell them that medications based off of studies will give you about 40 to 50% improvement. But if you want like, you know, a much more optimal improvement, then you have to add the therapy aspect of it. But the therapy aspect is only as good as how prepared you are, right? So it's not good to just be an empty vessel. I want to present myself to therapy, right? So and I think that's one thing that we're missing. It's not enough to just go to therapy, right? Is it what do you do with what you're taught in those therapy sessions? Are you applying those things on an everyday, day-to-day basis? Because truly that is where the therapy is, right? Physically taking yourself to therapy, that's you saying, hey, I'm doing this to better myself. That's one aspect. And then the follow-up aspect is, you know, the activeness that occurs after you go to therapy. So the resistance to therapy I've seen in some of my patients is that, yes, they're not ready to have, you know, some of those tough conversations, right? They're not ready to do the work because therapy does require work. Again, and that work is, you know, digging deep within yourself to figure out, you know, what is it, how is it that I can improve, whether it's from an environmental standpoint, social aspects, etc. So I think for me, that was just what I wanted to add, that the biggest thing is preparedness. And then what do you do with after therapy, after your active sessions? How are you applying that to your real world?
Now, I really appreciate that point of that, because now, you know, seeing a therapist is sexy, right? Everyone is talking about, I see a therapist, right? But like she mentioned, like, then what, right? So, I mean, my thing is like, okay, you've been seeing a therapist for, let's say 20 years, but you're still the same person. So like, I mean, are you just have a friend you like talking to, right? Because it has to be a point of like, okay, you hear that you implement. Right. So typically what I tell people is like, yeah, I appreciate the first step that you're taking, but I also want you to be, I want to see some action behind that. So what are you learning? What information are you taking with you after you leave the session? Right. It's not just a badge of shame to put on a gram saying, hey, I see a therapist now. Right. So that means that I'm this whole person. But what about the work, the actual work itself?
Yeah, and one thing before I go, I was gonna say that if you're trying to, you know, explain therapy to somebody who might not typically get it, the way I say it is that, and I try to explain things as basic as possible. When you want to treat, like, let's say somebody has diabetes, right? There's two things that need to happen. Okay, your doctor will say, you know, I want you to take this insulin so that your blood sugar will go down. So then what is the part that you as the individual have to do? You have to change your diet, right? So when you change your diet and then the doctor gives you insulin, that gives you 100%. You're going in the right direction. So if I'm treating somebody who I'm deeming who has like bipolar disorder, etc., what I'm gonna say is, okay, you know, the medications are one part, and then the therapy is the part that you are gonna do on your own to get yourself to, you know, get you through all these obstacles, right? And again, it's how much intention you have, what are you going to do day to day? And I find that when I explain it that way, they kind of get it better, right? So when I compare it to, you know, hypertension, or I compare it to diabetes, or something that, you know, does not seem as, you know, well, for lack of a better word, like more derogatory or stigmatized, then I tend to see much more improvement from the standpoint of the patient.
So I have a question for the providers, the therapists who are in the session. Now, I think like one of the issues also for patients is that there's a reluctance or unwillingness to be honest about their thoughts, about themselves, right? Which prevents them from getting better, right? Like when you're not straightforward and honest about the feelings you have and some of the negative emotions or negative thoughts, then it's really, really difficult for someone who you're talking to like give you the tools, to give you that advice, to take that next step and improve. For you guys, like what experiences have you guys had with that? And can you speak to how important it is to go in there with an open mind, to be completely unfiltered so that the experts can help you guys get better?
Are you asking for like from a therapist point of view, how we get people to be open, or vice versa?
It's well, that's one. Like, how do you guys get people to be open, but then also speak to the importance of the patients being open in order for them to see improvements in their behavior?
Okay, I'll speak to the former. I think it all has to do with rapport. And I also think that when it comes to people sharing stuff, I'm a big believer of using myself. And so a lot of times when I like have clients, like the first 2-3 sessions, like building rapport, understanding each other, I find ways to also insert myself without getting too personal, talk about my experiences as a human being. Because I think with a lot of clients that I've had, they come in thinking that like a therapist is like a magician, or that they're like higher than. And so I think like trying to like even the playing field and let them know that you're also human, and let them know that not too much of what your struggles are, but like what you've seen work and how things are like more of like a journey and a process. So yeah, I believe in like a collaborative process when it comes to building rapport and using yourself.
Hi, just joining in. I'm Dr. Ukuku. I'm a psychologist in Philadelphia. One, I think your question is like really important because it's hard for people to be honest. We're not honest with ourselves, right? And so then we're asking people to be honest with someone else. And so that's kind of like a double thing of thinking about how can I really be honest with either how I'm feeling or the experiences that I've had. And so I think the importance of it is that if we aren't honest, then the work that we're doing it's for nothing, right? It's like you're going weekly for nothing. But it's really this idea of like, how do I open up to a point where I'm able to say, these are the things that have happened in my life. These are the things, these are the thought patterns that I have. And so I think that it takes time. I think it also takes a right fit with a therapist. I talk about that all the time, that just because even someone's Nigerian or Black or a male or woman, that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically align and be your therapist. Sometimes you have to shop around. It's kind of just like, you don't just pick one pair of pants every single time and say, that's it. Oh, one pair of pants didn't work, I'll never wear pants again. You say, okay, let me go and try these multiple things. But I think it's important. I think what's also difficult, kind of speaking even to like the Nigerian perspective of it, is that there is a protectiveness that can happen in Nigerian families. And so like we can almost have this very protective nature of like even talking about certain experiences, because it feels like, oh man, am I down talking my family? Am I saying this and that, other than saying like, I can actually be honest. And so I see that as a perspective. And so for me personally, when I start working with people, I just take time. I ask a lot of questions, but then also I do a lot of reflections with it and helping to normalize that it is weird. After the intake session, one thing I always do with people is our very next session, I ask them how it went. And I'm like, what was it like for you? How did you feel afterwards? It's weird to talk about yourself for 45 minutes or an hour, and it's just about you. But I think that as you get used to it a little bit more, it gets a bit easier.
Thank you, Dr. Kuku. These are awesome pointers. Thank you, Uzoma, and whoever else that spoke to. I can't name all of you guys. Great points in terms of how to get someone vulnerable or getting your patient vulnerable in your field. Let's spin this around to different questions. Take it back to the childhood. What about your childhood still lives with you today? Could be trauma, it could be statements or words that probably still lives with you to today. What about your childhood still lives with you till today, or the weight you're carrying from your childhood?
So it's funny. I made this discovery in therapy like a couple, maybe my first session, and I think Uzama and I, we've had a lot of offline discussion. He's my guru offline, so very insightful. But I was telling him that life is about, the first step is you have to unlearn yourself, then learn about yourself, right? Because a lot of stuff that we come into was just given to us, right? We were just born into a situation, kind of adapted it. So in my therapy session, and I had to get to a point like why silence bothers me so much, right? Just extended silence. And it's just something that I've carried with me all the time. So what I've noticed that, when stuff is too calm, like I kind of want to add small noise, to kind of shake things up. So in having those discussions, it dawned on me that, kind of growing up in that Nigerian household as a child, like you don't really have much of a voice, right? Whatever your parents or the adults said, you just kind of went with, like, you don't question the adults. They can tell you that the sky is Octoroon or fuchsia. It's okay, I agree, because you're a kid. You're not supposed to push back on that. So over the years, I've kind of, been like, why is it that, silence, kind of has this hold on me? Then it was through this discovery that it kind of dawned on me, this is where this is coming from. And that has then helped me with my interaction with people, right? Because we not being aware when if someone is silent, it could be that, oh, work got busy, they were doing X, Y, and Z, but my old mind goes to, oh, they're ignoring me, or my voice is not being heard. So just being aware of those things has then helped how I look at my interaction with other people.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that question was one I've come to sit with quite a bit, right? And as Chinonso mentioned, I have a 2-year-old, right? And I want to spin that question a little bit from the weight side of it to sort of on the positive side of it, as far as we talk about mental health and being able to, look at yourself and how you carry yourself moving forward. And as the more I look at my daughter, and how she behaves, there's a day I woke up, I kind of was just watching her, and I told myself, next time I see my mom or my aunt, I'm gonna apologize to her for being such a crazy kid, because in her, I'm seeing so much of who I was, and each day that I interact with her, I realize that even if I yell at her or I tap her a little bit, I'm the one that gets to feel bad, right? Because for her, what she's doing is as pure as it gets. There's no bias about it. There's nothing. It's basically the human being you're watching being who she is. But my reaction to that, my response to that, I can control, right? I can choose to yell. I can choose to not yell. I can choose to tap. I can choose to. So what I came to realize about that is there's something about the childhood, right? That if we can understand who we were back then, what is it about us that stuck out? What is it about us that stayed to today? I think it will help us really learn who we are today. Because at the end of the day, as we get older, we start meeting people, we start going through experiences. Who we are begins to take a form. It begins to get impacted. There's some bias about it. But there's something down the core about us that stays. And once we find out what that is, we can touch anyone, anything we want. And for me, I think one of my thing has been, being stubborn, to be quite frank. And you know, and I was sitting down with my mother-in-law, and when we brought up the word stubborn, I threw out the term persistent. And I'm like, you didn't call it, right? It's the same behavior, but you decide which one you want to call it. But the reason I put that out there is because I came to realize I was such a stubborn kid. I was very persistent in what I wanted, how I wanted it. And I'm realizing today that just about anything I'm doing, I'm still holding on to that character. And that defines who I am. That helps me be the person that I am. It's just a question of how am I applying it from day to day to be able to maintain my original self, right? And also to make sure I'm not applying it negatively. So, you know, so as Chinonso and I talked about that, it just kept hitting me that I think we need to take a step back and really kind of understand who we really are. And one of the areas I like to go tap into is my childhood. As Chinonso mentioned, understanding how we grew up as Nigerians, you know, silence is a big thing for us, right? You know, or being ignored is a big thing. If you realize that's how it was for you as a child, and that's what you're responding to today, you can take the change you need to take. You can recognize who you really are and why you're responding to things the way you are. And I think that can help you be able to manage, you know, yourself going forward.
Excellent point. I think it's great to explore our childhood because it's pretty much the experiences of our childhood that probably shaped us to who we are today. I believe somebody else wanted to say something.
Yeah, man, I just wanted to chime in on that, and you really hit it right on the head when you kind of talk about the inner outer body experience, right? At the end of the day, and sometimes we forget about the tools that we have in our toolbox, and because we're always caught into new tools, right? But sometimes we got to go back into that toolbox and get that tool out and sharpen it back up, learn how to reuse it because it is valuable at the end of the day. We just have ignored it. And I feel the same way, man. I a lot of times I have to go back to my childhood experience or a time where I have like succeeded at the highest level or failed at the highest level. And what did I learn from that, right? To like where I am like right now at this moment in time. When we start thinking about like opportunity and opposition, right? Because the health side is in the middle of it, right? Because we get so caught up into this opportunity that the opposition is weighing us down mentally. You see what I'm saying? And so it's just very important that we do not neglect the tools that we have in our toolbox. You know, it don't matter how long that hammer's been in there. It's just a hammer. Yeah, that's true. But we're so caught into these new power tools. But that hammer is there for a reason. You know, that hammer was there in the beginning. It may be plain, it may be simple, but at the same time, it's something that's effective. And when we go back to that past and go back to that certain tool in our toolbox and really understanding the importance and value of it, then we know that we can still use this tool in a very effective way of where we are at this moment in time in life, because it repeats itself in some form or fashion, right? When we start thinking about opportunity and opposition. And so, yeah, man, that you definitely hit it on the head with that inner outer body experience.
Thank you. You raised a valid point in saying, understanding the tools that we have and make use of the tools that we have, and then just adding on. But my question is for, some of the folks, this might be a new introduction to what mental health is, and we probably don't know the tools we already have. Do we have to go by to see a therapist to identify that? Or is this something we just have to do a deep reflection to our childhood experiences and kind of pinpoint what those tools are? For someone who is very naive to what mental health is and maybe the tools you're referring to, how can I, one, identify those toolbox that I already have within me?
So I'll give this one a shot. So, part of me, if I'm responding to these ones, because I get very passionate about these particular subjects, because for me, this is a fresh journey for me, in sort of personal development. And these tools are becoming very, very important to me, because I'm learning that there was a comment I read somewhere, and it kind of said that we have basically given all of our powers to heaven, right? So it's in no way basically saying there's no God or anything, but it's basically saying to us, when someone says God is love, when someone says, God is this, all belongs to God, it's true. But some people say it and they're basically relinquishing all their abilities to God and saying that here on earth, I'm incapable of doing certain things. I think sometimes we need to kind of just remind ourselves that, from a religious perspective, we're creating an image of God that we talk about, and we are capable of those things. We here on earth are the ones that are doing those things, right? We are the ones that are serving as agents of change to another human being. One way that I've come to kind of pay more attention to this is one is meditation. I don't know how many of us do meditation. If you do it, and you're very, you're getting better at it over time, you come to start to realize that there's certain things that you will find out inside you if you listen very carefully that will scare the hell out of you. It will scare the hell out of you. And you have to explore that. You really have to pay attention to that. That will help you understand one tool that you have. The other, because a tool that we have is our ability to process things. It's always going to start here, right? So our ability to process things. The next thing for me was writing things down. If you're someone who likes to write things down, if you remember school and we write things down, you go back and you read certain things. What if putting God first really means staying connected at work to your mental health? I'll respond to that quickly, Howard. So if you like to write things down and you really start to look at those things, you may start noticing a pattern. That pattern could be a tool, how you're responding to things. It could be what is happening to you. And when you look at what is happening to you being a pattern, you start to ask yourself, how can you respond to those things? And in the process of asking those questions, you could find an answer. That answer is a tool. We just refuse to attach the term to it because we don't want to believe we can. We're finding it difficult to believe we can as an individual because of all the experiences we've had. And it goes back to that bias we're talking about versus childhood, right? Separating the world experiences from who we were coming into adulthood. And I think that, that's one way to find those tools. Another way is obviously go to therapy, if you're unable to do these things on your own. As far as putting God first, to be aware of your mental health, there's no question, again, from a religious perspective, I try to be very mindful of religious conversations depending on who the audience is, right? If you're a religious person and you believe in God, as I do, there's nothing wrong with, praying to God, paying attention to some of the Bible studies you're reading, some of the sermons you're reading. But if you do actually listen to those things, if you pay attention to what you're reading, it's at the end of the day really telling you what's going on the planet you're in. It's really teaching you how to respond to situations you have experienced or you are going to experience. We just refuse to believe that it impacts the real world. We believe it's something out of a Bible that happened 10,000 years ago, and we fail to see that it's happening today. And the Bible is telling us how to respond to it in certain cases. So we have to kind of start realizing that we are in the real world. Whatever we're reading, take it and pay attention to it. Understand how it impacts today, how it impacts you as a person, right? And then approach it, because supernatural or not, we are supernatural. If Amazon can be created out of nothing, if a computer can be created out of nothing, for those who lived when we didn't even have electricity back home in Nigeria, we human beings created those things. Someone thought about those things, right? So I think that, those tools live within us, and it's just a matter of, paying attention to things we're coming across, whether it's the Bible, things we're coming across, whether it's meditation, things we're coming across, whether it's just writing down our day-to-day experiences, people we're interacting with, and how we're responding to that will definitely help us figure out some of those tools, my perspective.
To piggyback off of Uzoma, I think what you said was spot on. People have a tendency to separate the two as if they're religion and, you know, mental health and mental illness, and getting therapy as if it's like a betrayal of each other. I've found that it's somewhat, for some people, it's somewhat the easier route to go through prayer. Because if anybody's even questioning it, you could just say, well, I'm praying to God. And nobody, most of the time, no one's going to question God. You know, but if you say, okay, I need therapy to help, now it's somewhat it leaves some wiggle room for people to now start judging you. And so I personally believe that, yes, like you said, the Bible is there. And I've always preached that to people. And I won't sit here, I'm not someone that's throwing Bible in front of somebody's face all the time, but I'll say it is a guide. You know, it's the word of God is a guide for you. But at the same time, God equally gave you willpower. He gave you all these tools to you control yourself. It's not saying that, okay, because I'm doing this, I'm negating what the Bible's telling me, or because I'm trying to understand myself, or like you said, sharpen my tools, that all of a sudden, because it's not 100% going towards your religious, your God, or whatever the case may be, is going somewhat deviating, doesn't mean that you're less of a religious person. It just means you're using the willpower that God gave you, the brain that God gave you, the thought process to fix yourself. And and He's giving you multiple things. Like right now, if you wanted to nail something on the wall, going back to the hammer analogy, you're not going to sit here and just use your hand. And say, okay, well, it's God's will, I'm going to do it. No, you'll go and buy a tool that's going to help you to get that nail in the wall. So that's what I see it as. I see it as therapy is just you're going out to get a tool that's going to help you achieve your goals.
Thank you very much, Uchenna. I appreciate the comments and the feedbacks in terms of, you know, exploring the toolbox that you have within. It will lead me to my next question, but I do want to get some input from, you know, some people who have not spoken. As I said, this is probably going to be engaging. So if you have some experience of mental health or therapy, or you're still yet to seek help, or you don't need help, you're just here for insight, we would like to get your opinion. So I have a few people on here. I have Anthony Steve, I have Nana, I have Ade, I have Mr. Carl, I have iPhone, I have a few people who haven't mentioned anything, and Judy, I believe. And I will be calling on you to see if you have an input. Have you gone through therapy? Have you discussed mental health with men or with females? And what has that experience been before I tag to the next question?
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I have a hard stop at 9. I have to go pick up some people from the train station. It was a pleasure talking to you all, and I look forward to the next event. Hopefully we can connect on Instagram or something.
Thank you, Uzama. It's a pleasure having you.
Take it easy, yo. Definitely. Take it easy. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, bro. Doc, I think you're on mute.
Oh, yeah, I'll chime in. Hello, everyone. I got on, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, I got on a little bit late, so I apologize for that. But I think you posed the question broadly about whether or not I had participated, gone to therapy, etc. Yes, I have. Actually still do. My story, I guess I first went around 2013, probably around 2013. It was, there was a lot of work-related stress, and it was sort of recommended that I do that, and I did. And it was great, an opportunity to talk, to have someone to talk to that was outside of that space. I was working in a relatively small town space, so laughs, and I felt like I needed an outlet, and that I went through the EAP program at the job, and the therapist came about. So then I left Pennsylvania in 2014 and did not see anybody for like 3 years. And so around 2017, I said, I really need to start back. And I don't have a diagnosis or anything like that, but it's been very, very valuable to me as far as that introspection and that looking inside, and that really being given tools to cope with transitions in life and that kind of thing like that. So I think it's very valuable. I recommend it to folk. I've heard a lot of the comments about, stigma that can be attached in Black communities among Black men, et cetera, et cetera. But, one of the things I always tell people that, I tell people I'm very open about the fact that I talk to somebody once a month. I work in a university environment where you're dealing with a lot of other people's stuff. And it really does help you it has helped me to be able to go somewhere that I can just say what I need to say without it coming back to me and all of that kind of stuff like that. And really work through working through, because sometimes we do carry things that we pick up in our environment. And so just really working through that, but also working through myself. And taking hard looks at myself and my whats and whys and hows and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's very valuable. And I thank you, Chinomsa, for inviting me into this forum.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else before I pose the next question? All right, so we talked about toolbox and we talked about looking within and outward and adding on as we've talked about their previous experiences shared here. So for the people here, what are some of your favorite healthy coping mechanisms?
Yeah, for myself, I exercise in the morning. I've incorporated that into as my coping skill because I deal with to start my day off just to help ease off any anxiety or stress. At least exercising three times a week has been very helpful for me. So coping, that's one of my coping skills. I enjoy watching movies or TV shows, anything entertainment. So that's a way for me to sit back, relax, either laugh, be intellectually challenged. That helps me. And then listening to music. And the thing I love about music is you could choose whatever mood you want to be feeling with the music. Or if you want to be inspired, you pick a song that motivates you, regardless of what music genre it is. So that helps me get through stuff, and it helps me be a better provider too, because when I'm talking to patients, I do disclose my coping skills with them, and because I think that helps them see me as a real person, that I'm just not just a person they're coming to, but I'm just somebody real that goes through life situations. And I'm like, yeah, I dealt with my weight sometimes fluctuating, or if I'm stressed, I'm a stress eater. So that's some of the things I tell them I have to learn how to make restrictions to the way I'm eating, or making sure I'm exercising or having somebody accountable. So I think there is a lot of coping skills out there. I always say choose the one that works best for you, but it's also good to hear what other people do. And then you could say, maybe I might implement scrapbooking or photography or DJing or playing basketball with my friends. So it's good to find what works best for you.
Thank you, Dr. Fine. Anybody else like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I have a morning routine that I've been doing for the last 3 years, and to me, it starts with meditation. First thing in the morning, I do 20 minutes of right now something called loving kindness meditation, but the goal is to pick an anchor point and focus on that. So that kind of settles me. And then I do this a quick journal, like a gratitude journal, like a 5-minute journal. So things I'm grateful for, what I'm looking for today. And the two final pieces, which kind of seems very minor, is to ensure that I make my bed every morning, right? It seemed very minor, but you can have a really messed up day, right? But when you come in and see, at least you can feel like, well, I did nothing today. I accomplished nothing. But then you come home, you say, oh, well, I'm in my bed, right? So that kind of starts that shift in your mind. And of course, exercising, Ifeanyi and his wife, they're you know, a couple that works out together stays together. So they're very like, you know, committed to that. So fitness is like another, you know, huge piece of it for myself, right? Because is the notion of cognitive and behavior, right? Like I think about it and I do, right? I can't think my way out of stuff, right? I have to think for me, then do like you find you mentioned is these are what works for me. Just like with diets, you can have the best diet in the world, but if you don't stick to it, it's pointless, right? So it's to find the stuff that works for you and then stick with it. I mean, I preach meditation to a lot of people, it just don't stick to them, right? But other people have other, you know, healthy mechanisms that they use to cope. So those are the key ones that I go to often.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else would like to say or talk about the healthy coping mechanisms they use on a day-to-day basis?
Well,
just
oh
my bad.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just I'll be quick, but yeah, just to kind of piggyback off everyone, you know, the ritual, the routine, right? The routine is so important because it sets the day, it sets the tone for you, right? So back to his point, like I'm huge on meditation, working out, and even another one for me, you know, I smoke weed, so you know that's something that like kind of just keeps me like to know me, you know, like I just being 100, you know, and so that, but at that moment in time, that's my coping mechanism, you know what I'm saying? Where I'm able to kind of sit back, inner outer body experience, assess the situation, right? And then come back to it and be like, okay, I think I'm ready. I got something strategic lined up on how I'm going to tackle that opposition at that moment in time. So shout out to my weed smokers. I know this is being recorded. My apologies. It is legal in some states. So yeah, don't shoot the messenger. Just shoot it. Just bring it my way. I take the smoke. So yeah. But yeah, just that routine and smoking weed, you know, that helps me, real talk. So yeah.
Now I get the inner and outer body experience. I got you. Okay, Uchenna.
Well, for me, because like I kind of go back and forth with things. So some weeks I could be perfectly fine, and then other weeks it's like, so I don't have a set routine. I'm trying to work on a set routine. But I will say the one thing I've realized that makes me relax all the time is me sitting by myself in silence, locked in a room, and listening to music. Like once I do that, I could just sit on my phone 30 minutes to 45 minutes capacity. I wouldn't even realize it. But it's the one time I'm not thinking about any stressors. I'm not thinking about, you know, what's going on in my personal life or what's going on in my work life or what's going on. It is the one time that I feel absolutely relaxed and free. So I believe that's one thing that I realize I need to incorporate every day. Like if I don't have that, I'll be one angry Green Hulk guy that's just mad at everything. But I know that particular thing, and actually was like, well, you know, so it says I started like maybe if I work out, that could be a stress reliever, because I know at one time, you know, that what one of my friends was like, yo, just go work out. It's a stress reliever. And I was like, how is it stress reliever? Because I'm killing my bones. Is that why it's a stress reliever? But it's, you know, I'm going to take him up on it now.
Yeah. Thank you, Uchenna, for sharing. I believe.
I just want to add something real quick to the point that Uchenna made. So I do have people who have suggested meditation and they struggle with it. And what kind of got me going was what he talked about, you know, listening to my favorite song on repeat, right? Mm-hmm. So it could be 5 minutes, but the goal is like you're still, right? So I think we all engage in different forms of meditation, and we just call it something different. Because in the gym, you have to meditate, you have to focus. So if you're lifting that bar and you're not paying attention, you're gonna die, right? So in a sense, there's a different forms of meditation just applied differently. I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Mr. Uzo?
Yeah, so I want to add to that too, right? Because I like to make references to the changes that I've had in my own personal life. You know, when I before I had a family, it was easy for me to maintain some routine, right? Especially work out, get my morning routine going, I'll wake up consistently. But now my days get sometimes dictated by, family activities and kids being around and stuff. I tend to find that there are certain things around the house that I use as a way to, pull myself back. So, bear with me here, right? Doing dishes helps me a lot. Doing laundry helps me a lot. Just that moment to sit down and just fold clothes, right? And just look at it and allow myself to just be calm and just fold clothes for 20, 30 minutes. Think about where they go, think about it's like a way for me to collect myself, pull myself together in that period. And when I'm done, I can just get up and say, this is an accomplishment. Let's get back to the next thing, right? Doing dishes, the sound of it, paying attention to where you're putting the next dish. Are you washing it cup by cup, or are you washing it plate before cup, spoon and fork before? Just understanding what's happening as you're doing it as a person helps me a lot, and to me, I look at that as another way of doing things, since I haven't been able to get myself back on a consistent routine, because from day to day, I don't know which 2-year-old I'm going to get and which 2-month-old I'm going to get. So my morning could change easily. But those things that I know that I can do, the sound of the tap when it's running, when I'm washing the plates, when it's clinking, when I'm washing, the washing machine, when I'm going downstairs to go, just those little activities I pay attention to kind of bring myself back to reality, because I start to recognize that each one of those activities is actually happening in real life. I think we sometimes look at those things as just chores that we check off and keep moving. They are part of our real life. So I try to take them in and make the most of just those, those moments that I'm doing those things and pull myself together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oza. You have to let me know there's an order in washing dishes now, but okay. Just playing. We do want to move on to the last question.
Okay, I wanted to say something real quick. Okay, I'm back.
We do want to run to our last question for the evening, and I think this is the meat of the discussion. What will you do, or how will you talk to your male friend who you suspect is having challenges with mental health? How do you think you approach it? How do you think you introduce therapy or other coping mechanisms? What are the signs that you might see, you may or may not see? We really want to spend the last few minutes in discussing how you approach someone or your male friend who is challenging, who are exhibiting symptoms of mental health, and how you go about engaging that conversation in order to seek help.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on that. I think that's a great question, and from that standpoint, one of the things is when you start seeing your friend withdraw, and they're not doing their normal activities during the COVID, it kind of murked things up. But let's say everything's are slowly opening back up, and you're usually with your buddies, and that same friend is not really picking up phone calls, not coming with the crew. Those are some telltale signs. Then you start noticing they're having they're more aggressive or irritable towards people. They're divulging that they're not doing well at work. You're noticing things are slightly falling off, and they're doing little things that they typically don't do. You notice that they don't have the same amount of energy. They're eating more, eating less, and they're worrying a lot. So those are kind of some telltale signs that you might, as a friend, say, hey, you're like, hey, what's going on? Tell me, bro, what's up? Let's rap. And if they're able to express, it's tough because they're trying to be vulnerable, but that's the good thing about friendships, it should be non-judgmental. And when they're just telling you things, it may be good to say, hey, I'm here for you all the time, but you may want to go see a help of a professional that knows the science and the techniques to help get you through this. And it's not an easy pill. There may be some pushback, but I always say to people, if you're going to come to your appointment, you can always bring your support system with you. They could wait in the waiting room, or if you feel comfortable with them coming into the session as well, you can. I've had that. both, as long as the person that I'm treating is comfortable with their support system there, I'm down for it as a provider. So I think just saying that, hey, I'll be there with you, support you if you need me to help look for somebody, because sometimes when you're depressed, you don't have that energy to go even search, to go on Google and find a provider. So if you're willing to, as a friend, to help search for somebody, that'll be good. Or even somebody struggling with anxiety, they may think, oh, what is the whole Nigerian community or what is the Black community gonna think about me if they catch me going see a therapist? What are people they're gonna think I'm weak? But you could flip it and say, that's actually, you're strong. You're actually asking for help. You know, not asking for help is a weakness, you know? So just like being there to encourage it. We're in the age now where, like somebody mentioned earlier, now it's cool to get therapy right now, but it's like, but at the same time though, just like giving that positive, you know, brotherly love. I think that's important. Just, I got you. I got your back regardless. And regardless of what you're going through, I'm here. So you can't get rid of me. So I think that's important.
That support system, that's awesome. Anybody else can share what you might do? You may have experienced this before. It's probably an issue or concern ongoing right now in terms of trying to engage your friend to seek professional help or to engage in healthy coping skills. What would you do, or how will you handle such situation? You can go now, sir.
I mean, just to kind of add on to what Ifeanyi said, it's good. From my experience, it's been helpful to not say, hey, I think you're depressed or I think you're anxious, right? What has worked better is like, hey, bro, like you ain't been in the gym in the last 2 weeks. Like I ain't seen you like, you know, talk about, you know, your sports team in a minute, like, you know, what's going on, right? So you kind of tie it to their everyday living. And what I've found to be helpful is like, if Ifeanyi mentioned, like in my darkest moments, like I wasn't even sure what I needed, right? I had no idea, right? So sometimes I think it's helpful to kind of get someone going to eliminate as many obstacles as possible, right? Instead of saying, hey, come hang out with me this weekend, just go see them if it's possible, right? Or, you know, go pick them up, or just, you know, be physically present. Because I mean, I think part of it is we all crave like, you know, human connection, which is why a lot of us had a hard time during COVID because we were deprived of that. So I think identifying something concrete that in terms of behavior, and if you're able to eliminate as much obstacle as you can possibly can to kind of get that person going.
Perfectly said. Anybody else have anything to contribute in terms of, yes, Uzo?
Yeah, I think one of the, just to take that one step back is, you know, if you're someone, I know a lot of this goes back to, obviously you have to have a friend, right? To be able to even do this, or be in a given organization or group or whatever, right? And if you are in that, I think it's, you know, not living their life for them, but take a step back and pay attention to who you're around. Because the only way you understand if there's a deviation is if there's a starting point, right? So if you understand who people are, how they normally behave, and I'm using the term normally loosely, from when you've known them, how you've known them, then you can identify whether there's some shift happening and how to respond, you know, and when to respond to that shift. I like the idea Chinonso mentioned of actually going to see someone as opposed to asking them to come out, right? Because it's like telling someone to get off your funk and start coming, which is not always going to be the easiest thing to do. You know, sometimes it's showing up and just kind of reaching out, depending on how close you are with that person. You know, for me, if I identify something like this and I'm kind of fairly certain that this person is going through some kind of withdrawal or something going on, you know, quite frankly, it will be a difficult conversation, mainly because I've also had some experiences with some losses, and I recognize how difficult it can be to you know, to even begin to address that. But I tend to enjoy sort of like giving people, you know, a call, right? Because one thing that I tend to understand is, text messages are text messages. They work for some people, but I think when you give someone a call and hopefully they do answer, just hearing your voice, like people say, getting that tone, getting the feeling that this person actually does care for me, right, goes a long way if you can see them in person. I think that's a good starting point. But I like to make sure that at least I pay attention to my friends, make sure they understand that, hey, I'm paying attention to who you are. I'm aware of the kind of person you are, so that when I'm telling the person, hey, I noticed this, or hey, you haven't done this in a while, they will know that I'm coming from a place where this guy knows me well enough, he cares well enough to even identify this change. Because sometimes people withdraw when they don't even think that you genuinely care, that you bringing this up is a genuine care. So I think starting off with showing that you are paying attention to begin with, when they are okay, makes it easier for you to transition to when they're not okay, to say, hey, something is off a bit here, and you know that you're talking to someone who actually genuinely does care.
I just want to add real quick, and I think also the way we ask certain questions may also elicit the right response, right? Because I've noticed there's a difference between how are you doing versus how are you feeling, right? So I think those two things really matter, because we don't really get into the feelings as much. But if you ask a guy, like from my experience, when I've asked, like, how you feeling, I'm more likely to get the how they're actually feeling versus I ask, like, how you doing? It's like, you go, oh, I'm good, I'm straight, I'm fine, right? It's kind of like a canned response. But when I've asked, like, how are you feeling, I've tended to get more of like what's really happening with the person.
Thank you. I hope that we've gotten a few tips, a few things to engage our conversations back home and to our friends. I think the discussion about having these conversations with friends is something that we can't really decipher all here tonight. I think it's an ongoing conversation, and we do need to be equipped on how to address those questions. Just like Nonso pointed out, it's possibly how we're going about asking the questions, whereby we're not getting the response that we want to get. So something as simple as that is you might get a better response versus just how you're doing, which is very shallow these days. So I think we can exhaust how we can bring these discussions to our friends tonight. But we do hope that you can do your research. You can educate yourself some more. You can reach out to any of the panelists here tonight. You can reach out to Talk Naija and see how you can engage conversations if you have a friend or two who you might suspect is undergoing some challenges as well. I seen and I had commented that I suggest yoga and meditation for being present in the moment. Thank you for that input. We are short of time, and we thank you guys for tuning in with us, hanging out with us, and really sharing your experiences as a Black man or a Black woman, as an African or not African, how you deal with mental health or how mental health is being addressed in our communities. And we do hope and we charge that, you have these conversations in your households, in your communities, within your friend groups, so that we break down these stigmas that we talked about in regards to mental health. A great shout out to our panelists, Uzoma, Chiko, Kafa, Matthew. Shout out to Ghana for you guys for being present and being our panelists for tonight. Thank you, UIU Houston and Talk Naija for hosting this platform for us to engage and have conversations about. So once again, if you do have questions or if you want to elaborate or talk more, reach out to Talk Naija and they'll help you with providing resources, or you can just talk to one of our panelists here in terms of what tips and resources you might need moving on as you progress with your mental health. So we do hope that you guys all have a great night, and thank you guys for joining us this evening.
Yeah, take care. Thank you so much, guys.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.